All right, so are you ready to dive into Theranos?
Oh, absolutely. It's a story that just grabs you, doesn't it?
Yeah, I mean, from what I've been reading about it, it's incredible. This company promising to like revolutionize blood testing.
With just a finger prick, yeah.
And then poof, it all just disappears.
Billions of dollars gone.
It's wild. And Elizabeth Holmes, the founder, she was this like
She
icon,
was the next Steve Jobs, they called her.
but then it all falls apart. So where do we even begin with this story?
Well, we have to start with Elizabeth Holmes herself, right?
Yeah, okay.
I mean, even as a kid, like 9 years old,
Mm.
she's saying she wants to be a billionaire.
Whoa, really?
Yeah, there's this story about her, and it's just like ambition from the start.
Wow. And so she starts Theranos, which I guess comes from therapy and diagnosis.
Right, exactly.
Huh.
Putting those two together.
Clever.
Yeah.
But even early on, there are these hints that things aren't quite right.
Oh, yeah. Like she's amazing at getting investors, even people who know nothing about healthcare, are just throwing money at her.
Huh. So it's all about the sales pitch, not the actual science.
I mean, there were definitely experts who were like, wait, hold on, this doesn't make sense.
And she just ignored them.
Pretty much. She had this vision and nothing was going to stop her.
So what about the Edison? That was the machine, right? The one that was supposed to change everything.
Supposed to. But, well, it was never really what she claimed it to be.
Hmm. So from the get-go, the technology is flawed.
Yeah. And instead of facing that, she creates this culture of, like, secrecy and pressure at Theranos.
Okay, so now we're getting into the dark side of this whole thing.
Definitely. Like, employees were terrified to speak up, worked crazy hours. And there's this guy, Sunny Balwani, her partner.
I read about him. Yeah, intense guy, right?
So absolutely, no medical background.
Yeah.
But he's calling the shots, creating this environment of, like, fear.
And all this secrecy, I mean, was it just about protecting their ideas or was there something more to it?
I think it was more about hiding the truth. You know, the fact that the technology wasn't working, the problems they were having.
So they're building this, like, this house of cards.
Yeah, and the higher it gets, the more they need to keep people in the dark.
Wow. So how do they keep this going for so long? I mean, millions of dollars are pouring in, but the whole thing is built on a lie.
Well, Holmes was really good at targeting investors uh, who wanted to be part of something big, something disruptive.
So she was selling them a dream.
In a way, yeah. And she had this board of directors, all these high-profile people, that lent Theranos this air of legitimacy.
So it was all about the image, not the reality.
To a large extent, yeah. It was Silicon Valley at its, well, at its worst, I guess you could say.
And then they make this deal with Walgreens, right? They're actually going to start offering these tests to the public.
Yeah, 2013, that was a big turning point.
Because now it's not just investors they're fooling, it's actual patients.
And the pressure must have been immense. I mean, imagine the pressure to deliver on those promises with technology that doesn't actually work.
Oh, wow. That's when things start to get really, really messy.
Yeah, because instead of admitting it's not working, they double down on the deception.
From what I read, they were like taking blood samples at Walgreens and then secretly sending them to a different lab.
Right, and using traditional methods to test them. Nothing like what they were advertising.
And the Edison machine itself, it could only do a few tests, right?
A handful. And even those weren't that reliable because they were using these tiny blood samples.
And the lab itself, the one where all this supposed groundbreaking work was happening, it sounds like a complete disaster.
From what I've read, it was like cobbled together, understaffed, and no real quality control. It's amazing they got away with it for so long.
So they've got this like crumbling foundation, but they're still this big name, right? I mean, Elizabeth Holmes is everywhere.
Oh yeah, she's on magazine covers, giving these TED Talks, the whole thing.
So that must help them keep it going for a while, right? Like, nobody wants to believe the Golden Girl is, well, a fraud.
Yeah, it's like this aura of success makes people ignore the problems.
But someone had to see through it eventually, right?
It takes a few brave people and some good reporting. That's where John Carreyrou comes in.
The Wall Street Journal guy, yeah. He was the one who really blew it all open.
He was. And he got a lot of pushback, too. I mean, imagine going up against a company like Theranos.
With all their money and lawyers and, well, everything.
He talked to former employees, dug into the science, and he put together this really damning story.
So he's the one who exposes the fake demos and all that.
Yeah, and the fact that they were using like regular lab equipment for most of the tests.
Oh, wow. So the Edison machine was basically just a prop.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
And he also started looking into the lab itself.
Which we were talking about earlier.
Right, with all the issues and the lack of proper procedures.
So Carrie Rue's reporting, that was the beginning of the end for Theranos.
It was. And Elizabeth Holmes, she didn't take it well.
I can imagine.
She denied everything, tried to discredit him, even tried to stop the Wall Street Journal from publishing.
Wow. But the truth was coming out, right?
Yeah, and once those articles hit, it all started to unravel pretty quickly.
So what happens next?
Well, all of a sudden, everyone's interested. The FDA, other agencies, they start investigating.
And the investors.
They're running for the hills.
So it's like that house of cards finally collapses.
Exactly. And the consequences are huge. Walgreens drops them. Lawsuits are piling up. The company's value plummets.
So it's over for Theranos.
Yeah. In 2018, they shut it all down.
And what about Elizabeth Holmes and Sunny Balwani?
They get charged with fraud. Lots of counts.
So they actually faced, like, real legal trouble.
Oh, yeah. Holmes is found guilty, sentenced to over 11 years in prison.
11 years. Wow. That's a long time.
And Balwani gets even more, almost 13 years.
So it's like this cautionary tale, right? Ambition gone wrong, the dangers of believing the hype.
Yeah, and the importance of transparency, ethical behavior, all of that.
And also, like, the need to be skeptical. I mean, sometimes things are too good to be true.
Absolutely. You have to ask questions, do your research, not just buy into the story someone's selling.
It's a good reminder for all of us, really.
It is. The Theranos story, it's a wake-up call in a lot of ways.
Okay, so we've seen how Theranos went from, like, the top of the world to facing investigations and lawsuits. How did it all unravel so quickly for Elizabeth Holmes?
Well, you have to think about Silicon Valley. Back then, it was all about being disruptive.
Moving fast and breaking things.
Exactly. And sometimes that meant, not looking too closely at the details.
So are you saying Silicon Valley's culture kind of enabled this whole thing?
It played a part for sure. Holmes knew how to play the game.
She presented herself as this visionary, right? Like the outsider shaking things up.
And investors, they loved that. They wanted to be part of the revelation, even if the science wasn't there.
What about the board of directors? They had some pretty big names. You'd think they would see the red flags.
You'd think, right. But it seems they were more interested in the potential profits than the actual technology.
So it's like everyone was caught up in the hype?
Pretty much. The investors, the board, even the media, they all bought into the story.
And Theranos, with all that secrecy, they were able to keep the truth hidden for so long.
That's right. All those NDAs, the fear of speaking out, it created this, wall around them.
And then John Carey Rue comes along, this journalist, and he starts asking the tough questions.
And he doesn't give up. He keeps digging, even when Theranos tries to shut him down.
It's kind of like a David and Goliath story.
It is, and it makes you wonder how many other companies are out there doing similar things.
That's a scary thought. So what can we learn from all of this? How do we prevent another Theranos?
Well, investors need to be more skeptical.
Not just get caught up in the excitement.
Exactly. They need to demand proof. Look at the science, not just the story.
And what about the regulators? Did they drop the ball?
Well, Theranos exploited some loopholes.
Like how they kept their technology a secret, right?
Yeah, and that raises a bigger question. How do you regulate something that's supposedly revolutionary but also potentially dangerous?
That's a tough balance.
It is. You don't want to stifle innovation, but you also need to protect people.
This whole deep dive has been really eye-opening. I mean, I knew about Theranos, but this is like a whole other level.
It's a story that has it all. Ambition, deception, and the consequences of unchecked power.
It's a good reminder to think critically, to question things, and to, I guess, be wary of those who promise the world.
Absolutely. And to remember that the pursuit of progress, it shouldn't come at the expense of honesty and integrity.
Well said. This has been a fascinating look at one of the most captivating stories in business.
And a cautionary tale that I think we can all learn from.
Thanks for taking us through it. It's been a real journey.
My pleasure, and hopefully it encourages everyone listening to, stay curious and keep asking questions.